Thanks as always for listening to Fluff and Crunch. Today, I'm going to go solo and keep this relatively short. This comes off of our couple of episodes about Traveler and James being a new Traveler GM and introducing a bunch of players to the game for the first time. So I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the essential Traveler books and then additional tiers of books you might want to pick up if you're thinking about getting into the game. Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs and share our experience to hopefully help you have your best game. Okay, so we have done now 2 episodes wherein we talked about James running the high and dry introductory adventure. And I call it an introductory adventure because it touches on so many of the things that make Traveler as a setting and a system and the stories that you tell in it. So there's a link to that adventure in the notes, and there'll be a few other things that I'll include links to as well. But I was thinking, this game's been around for a long time. It's current, and it looks to be long-term future stewards, Mongoose Publishing. They have done really, I think, an outstanding job in terms of production value, variety of books, different kinds of adventures. I mean, they really hit the Traveler universe from a bunch of different angles, depending on like how you would want to run it or play it. I think Mongoose has got the stuff for you. And I've been collecting, on and off Traveler stuff and playing Traveler since the early to mid 80s when it was a GDW property, Game Designers Workshop. But anyway, purpose of this episode, like I said in the intro, is that I wanted to talk about what are the essential books and then what are your ought to have and might want to have tiers of books if you're interested in getting into Traveler. So here's where I'll start. Obviously, if you're going to play the game, you need a rule book. So I recommend that you pick up the newest comprehensive rule book that Mongoose puts out. It is the Traveler Core Rulebook Update 2022. There are 2 different covers available for it, but it's the same book on the inside. Now, this is really an outstanding core rulebook in that it has all of the rules you need to play the game. Here's the open secret. You actually don't need anything else beyond this core rulebook. All character creation rules are in it. All the different careers that you could make a character out of, scouts, army, merchants, agents, so on and so forth, all that stuff, all that's in the rulebook. All the skill and combat rules are in the rulebook. There is a hefty equipment section with all different kinds of weapons and vehicles and armor and all kinds of technological equipment of all tech levels. In other words, all the way from like stone axes to, plasma rifles and everything in between. There are full rules for starship operations, like how to run and use a starship with the skills system and with the core mechanic. There are starship combat rules. There are starship construction rules. There is a section of starships all the way from smaller vessels that are not actually jump capable. They would only stick within a star system, all the way up to larger ships that can hold a couple of hundred people. There are rules for running merchant characters and buying and selling and trading and things like that to make money, to fund that starship mortgage once you happily get the starship. My point is that, the last few Traveler rulebooks have provided this. The 2022 update cleans up. There's a handful of tiny mechanical changes from the previous Mongoose edition to this one, but then this also adds page count. So there's just some more content. This is really the only book that you need. However, I'm going to add in 2 other books as being what I really actually think that these are essential. If you want to get your head around Traveler as a setting, you should pick up the Third Imperium book. The Third Imperium book it's a source book. And what it does is it explains what is the Third Imperium and it goes back in history. If you don't know it or not, the Traveler The default traveler timeline, which picks up in the Third Imperium, is several thousand years in our future. And so the Third Imperium book, which is a great full-color hardback, almost as big as the rule book, it traces back the history of the Third Imperium by looking at the previous governments that came before it. And it sounds crazy. I've mentioned this in episodes, but 40 years of me and Traveler, I never really got my head around how does this government function? You know, if you're not super familiar with Traveler and it's call it technological canon, Traveler's faster than light travel is based in the jump drive. And jump drives are rated from 1 to 6. And that tells you how many parsecs that ship can jump in 1 week. So it's like, I think the way they explain it, it's like an efficiency thing. Like your higher rated jump drives are more efficient, they're more powerful. Therefore, in the 1 week, give or take a few hours, that a ship always stays in jump space when it enters jump space, some are able to go farther and some not so much. Your typical like decent merchant ship or scout ship is jump 2. Your absolute top of the line, like way expensive, high tech, barely anybody has them. They are controlled by the government, are jump 6. So that means your typical ship that your characters are going to have is going to be maybe jump 2, or if they really invest some money, maybe jump 3. If you go to travelermap.com, every hex is a parsec, which means that it takes literally months, if not a year or so, for information to flow from the Imperial core out to the frontier. And then almost a year to get an answer back. And so I always thought, like, how in the heck does this government function when information travels only as fast as the fastest ship? In a lot of ways, you need to look at Traveler as a universe as being akin to the great powers during the Age of Sail. There's lots going on in the English Empire. There's lots going on in colonies flung all around the world from European powers. But information only travels as fast as the fastest ship. So there's a lot of things that happen well outside of the direct control of the sovereign or the central government. And I always was like, how does this work? Well, back to this book. The Third Imperium book does a brilliant job by telling the story of how this government, how this massive polity came into being and how it functions. It explains the place of the Imperial Navy. It explains the place of the Marine Corps. It makes sense of the nobility, the aristocracy. And so in that respect, as a setting source, as a way to just ground yourself in the default canon of Traveler, I highly recommend the Third Imperium book. So that's the second book. You get the rule book, and the 2022 update, you get the Third Imperium book. I also recommend you get the updated version of the Traveler Companion. Now, the Traveler Companion is a collection of optional rules and ways to run the game. There are optional character creation rules. There are optional combat rules. All kinds of things. There are all kinds of other ideas for like, well, if you don't want to use jump drives, what if you want to use like a hyperdrive or hyperspace? And it just posits a bunch of different options. Now, you can run and play Traveler and be perfectly happy by running everything like default Third Imperium. Or you can use Traveler as Mark Miller, its creator, originally in part intended, which was to use the rules as something of a toolbox to create your own setting, your own science fiction setting. So if you have, like, let's say there's some movie you really dig and you're like, oh, wow, there's no game for that, or I don't like the game that exists for it, so I would love to do my own, but I really don't want to make my own system. I like the Traveler system. It's easy. It kind of sits in the background. Well, this whole jump drive thing doesn't really make sense from this. Oh, hey, here's an idea that's in the Traveler Companion, and they already have rules for it. So the Traveler Companion update, the original one is 169 pages. I know that the update is a little longer than that. And it has, again, optional rules for characters, character creation, pre-career options, skills and skill usage, combat, diseases, animal encounters, vehicle damage, refereeing the game, on and on and on. Every different aspect of Traveler, the Traveler Companion offers you oh, hey, you could do it like this, or maybe you could add this. I think that the Traveler Companion is really cool because it just gives you some more options. So I actually consider that, even though it's all optional, to be an essential book because I think it would broaden your sense of what this game could do. So 3 essential books: Rulebook, Third Imperium, Traveler Companion. Now, those are your 3 essential books, I believe, to get you into the universe. Well, obviously, you want to play some stories. You want to run some adventures or play some adventures. So here's what I'm going to recommend. Pick up the Marches Adventures 1 through 5. You can get it as a PDF. You can get it as a hardback. And what it does is they combine 5 adventures that had been out there. They've been out there for a while. High and Dry is the first of them. They take 5 adventures that all take place in the Spinward Marches. The Spinward Marches is a sector of space that is way out on the Imperial frontier. And so it's one of these places where there's lots of an opportunity for adventure because there's less development. Things are, well, it's a frontier. That obviously makes sense. So the Marches Adventures 1 through 5, it's a nice collection, has High and Dry, which is, listen to those episodes, great introductory adventure. Mission to Mithril, Search and Rescue, Artemis Wept, and Safari World. Okay, I have run High and Dry, and I've run Safari World. I haven't run the other ones, but I've read them. In my view, these 5 adventures are a good cross-section of the different kinds of experiences story-wise that players and GMs could have, and it also spotlights some different areas, themes, and trends in the Spinward Marches, which is a good place. The Spinward Marches, by the way, has been like a fallback or really kind of default adventure setting for many adventures that have been written over the last 40 some odd years. So the Marches Adventures 1 through 5, that is your last essential book, especially if you're going to be a GM. Now I drop to the tier 2, which is, these are the books that I think that if you like what you're doing, if you get those, or at least you get the rule book and you're like, wow, this is really great. I want to expand on this. I want more Traveler. These are the ones I recommend you get next. High Guard. High Guard is the naval expansion. And I mean by naval, I mean broadly starship operations. It's over 200 pages. It has a bunch more ship design rules and options, a whole bunch more when it comes to things like weapons and things that can go in starships, different kinds of ships, maybe from less advanced or maybe really advanced civilizations, space stations, different kinds of technology. It also touches on things like space mining that would obviously be related to starships. It has information about creating deck plans and fighters. It has rules for capital ship battles if you wanted to incorporate something like that. And that's like maybe 40% of the book. The rest of the book is just more ships. Now, the ships that are in the core rule book, I believe all of them are reprinted in High Guard. So you're like, well, I'm not getting all new ships. True, but you're getting a lot of new ships. So if the naval aspect, and again, our starship side of Traveler really floats your boat, High Guard, I think, should be next on your list. Another terrific book, if you are really into the equipment side of things, get the Central Supply Catalog. Central Supply Catalog is Mongoose's book of stuff. It's, like 150 some odd. I think the updated version is like 160 or 170 pages of every different kind of weapon and gear and tech and things like that. Personal and like things that are man portable and some larger things that are not. So Central Supply Catalog is really useful, especially, if the core rulebook has I think a robust equipment section. One thing you got to remember about Traveler is that Traveler characters don't have feats. They don't have special abilities or anything like that. You can't point at your character sheet and say, there's my special ability, I win the encounter. You have to be smart, you have to use your skills in a clever manner oftentimes, and you have to have the right equipment. And so if the idea of adding more different kinds of equipment and more varieties within each category of equipment, if that's interesting to you, yeah, well, I would get that. I would get the Central Supply Catalog. They also have a vehicle handbook, which is 150 some odd more pages of all different kinds of vehicles. These are not starships. These are primarily things like things that you'd find on a planet, anywhere from like ground vehicles to air vehicles. I only mention that because I'm comparing it to the Central Supply Catalog. I actually don't consider that to be an essential or an important one here. So I'm going to say High Guard and the Central Supply Catalog should be your next pair of books. Okay, now you've got your essentials. You've got your probably ought-to-haves. Now, how about other books in general? I'll give you a cross-section of ones that I own that I believe are really worth picking up, especially, if you want to expand your knowledge of the setting and also options for throwing at your players if you're running the game. There are 2 additional Starship Collection books. One is called Traders and Gunboats. The other is called Adventure Class Ships. That I think are quite good. I have the PDFs for those 2. And they expand, obviously, your options for ships. And what's nice about each of them is that they're divided into ships from different polities, different peoples, different governments, different areas of space. And so you get a little more variety. High Guard and the core rulebook give you primarily like default either Imperial Navy ships or things you would find in like bog standard Imperium space. Traders and Gunboats and Adventure Class ships pushes the boundaries out a little bit into other polities like the Aslan and the Vargur and the Zodani and things like that. So Sword Worlds as well. So if you're interested in what are the other governments, what do the other people's ships look like and how are they constructed, these 2 books will provide you with those. They're absolutely not necessary. If you were waffling on them, I would pick them up as PDFs from drive-thru and just add some breadth and depth to your ship collections. If you are interested in running an adventure that takes place in Imperium space involving primarily Imperium citizens and has a high action drama side to it, The Fifth Frontier War is quite a good book as well. It's just under 200 pages and it sketches out the entire war, really, from its origins and the opening moves of like why were the Zodani doing this and how did they do it and where did they attack and things like that. One of the things that Mongoose does, and they did this in the Fifth Frontier War book, they do this in the Imperial Navy book, which I'm not recommending, not because it's not a good book. I'm not recommending it because you won't need it unless you're really into running a Navy campaign and you want it to feel like they want you to make it feel. Both of these books, Fifth Frontier War and the Imperial Navy, are written more as like they're written in the tone of like a nonfiction, like informational text. It's like you're reading a history book or like a Jane's Guide, an explanation of real things rather than a discussion of stuff you'd put in a game. But the Fifth Frontier War is good in that it, especially if you have the Third Imperium. If you've read that, then you read the Fifth Frontier War book, you're like, oh, okay, I see how the Imperium, how it tries to defend itself and where that creates problems and why the Zodani, this other human government, why they have conflict. If you want to expand your knowledge, especially as a GM of the Traveler universe, and you wanted to potentially run like a war-based campaign, whether the characters are soldiers, service members or not, if you wanted to have the war surround them or be a backdrop or have them directly in it, Fifth Frontier War is a good book. If you want to run a ground combat, planetary combat focused campaign, the Mercenary boxed set is quite good in that it has all kinds of rules for running mercenary companies and things like that, and ground combat rules and whatnot. Again, kind of like the Fifth Frontier War, you read it and there are parts of it that read less like game material and more like informational text, like as if this were all real. But I think it's worth looking at if you're considering, okay, this is the type of campaign that we want to run. The last thing I'll touch on, and this might be for your ambitious but really excited new Traveler GM, is the Pirates of Drinax boxed set. It's actually not a box set, it's a slipcover. has 3 books in it and a big old fold-out map. And the Pirates of Drinax is a massive sandbox. It truly is a sandbox campaign that takes place not in the Spinward Marches, but in a relatively nearby sector that's also frontier space, and involves the characters becoming pirates or maybe privateers, depending on how you look at it, in the shadowy employ of a wannabe resurgent kingdom. And the 3 books, there's a book of ships, there's the set of adventures, and then there's all the background to the Trojan Reach, which is the area of space where it takes place. And then there's a big fold-out map. It's about $100. You could beat someone to death with the slipcase. It's large and it's all hardback and heavy. But if you're a GM and say you run high and dry, and you took my advice and you picked up that March's Adventures 1 through 5, and you maybe jigger around the locations of some of those adventures so that it's easier for the same group of player characters to experience all 5 of those. And your players are like, wow, this is really cool. We really dig Traveler. We understand the system. We get the basic tropes of the setting. What more can we do, either with these characters or with different ones? If you're staring down that, I would do some research into the Pirates of Drinax sandbox campaign, because it's huge. People that I've communicated with online who have run it, they've run it for months or even like a year or more. And it truly is a sandbox, albeit with moving parts that make the world breathe and feel more real. So that may be one that you check out. Now, I'll have links to all of these things, their drive-through links in the notes to this episode. And like I said, Traveler is a really great game. It's a terrific setting. It is simultaneously founded well in its canon and stories, and also very, very flexible if you wanted to run in a different direction. If you just wanted to use the rules and the equipment and the ships and tweak some things here and there, or maybe even significantly, you could set this in your own science fiction universe. If you own any of these books, if you've read them, if you've played any of these things, join our Discord. There's a link to that in the notes as well. And let us know what you think. Let us know what your favorite Traveler books are. Maybe there's other ones that you recommend. You can track us down on X as well. Just look up Fluff and Crunch on X, and there we are. We love the conversation and the interaction. Thanks as always for listening. Have a great day. Thank you as always for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes.